Hey everyone, it's Joy here for Honeybee Stamps. Today I created a really fun and easy mixed media Easter card. So I'm starting with some patterned paper. Look at that cute carrot paper. This is from the Simply Spring pattern paper, and it starts off as a 6 by 8.5 piece. Then the stamp set that I'm using here is the Spring Seeds seed packet add-ons, and I'm using the carrot, and so I'm going to ink this up with black ink. I already have my patterned paper trimmed down about 1/4 inch smaller than an A2 sized, so that would be 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I believe that's right. And I want to stamp the seed packet, the carrot seed packet. I'm going to stamp that 3 times on this background using Honeybee Stamps Intense Black ink. I'm just using an acrylic block. It doesn't need to be neat. I don't want the whole image. I want it to feel almost like patterned paper, and then we're gonna grunge it up and add some fun stenciling and some fun other elements. But this was really easy to do, and normally mixed media really stresses me out and I feel like I can't do it, but I think if you just do one layer at a time, it's so much easier. I'm stamping the sentiment that says Spring Carrots in the little banner on the seed packet. That's also in that Spring Seeds seed packet add-ons. Then I want to use the Eggstra special stamp. I'm using the Farm Fresh sentiment, and this sentiment here says Grown with Love, and I just love how pretty the script is. I'm going to stamp it where you can see it fully on that center part of the card, and then stamp it off the sides just a little bit. Then I want the Farm Fresh. I'm going to turn that sideways, and then just a little bit on the other 2 areas. I really didn't think about this much. I just thought I'm just going to dive in and we're just going to go for it and cross my fingers that it turns out looking good. And I think it did turn out really good. Now that that's done, let's do some inking. I am using the Tea-Dye Distress ink. I'm going to brush this along, and I actually ended up doing it heavier, but I started light, gave it a look, and kind of decided how I want it to be. I definitely darkened up the edges here a little bit. The corners I think are always great because, you know, that's where you're touching it a lot. That's what's going to be darker. But then I decided to go even more dark. I looked at it for a minute and I thought, you know, this needs to be a little more. So I'm going to those corners, going in different directions. So if you see the ink marks, it's not just in the same direction. Now I am using the Distress Embossing Glaze in Speckled Egg. I am just laying this on the top. I don't have any ink to adhere it to because I don't want straight lines from the ink pad, if that makes sense. So the key to this is you have all this loose powder on top. You need to heat it from the bottom. Keep moving it around, but as you can see, it's starting to melt. Then I'm turning it around so I don't get my fingers in the heat, but heating it up from the bottom will melt it, and then I just go over the top really quick, and then you've got that gorgeous blue, which I think blue and orange is so beautiful together. Let's add another media to this. Let's do, I use the Distressed Embossing Glaze, the textured, I already did that. The Texture Crackle Paste, it's the opaque one, so it's gonna stay white. I am using the Daisy Lattice stencil, and there's 3 stencils in that, I believe. I'm just using the leaves, and I'm making sure it's nice and thin so it dries quicker, but once it dries, it's gonna crackle, which I think adds adds a fun element to this background. So I just have a few pieces there. Then I have some acrylic paint. This is not sold on Honeybee Stamps. It's a turquoise. It's called Mermaid Sparkle. It's Sparks acrylic paint. I'm going to splatter the background because, again, the blue, like a turquoise or any blue, I think is really, really pretty with the orange, like I said earlier. So I'm going to splatter that background. I can set this aside so the paint and the stencil paste will have time to dry. This is another piece of patterned paper from the Simply Spring pattern paper. This is trimmed down as an A2 sized. I'm using that same Tea-Dye Distress ink. Then I'm going to use my scissors and rough up the edges. I'm bending the corners up and away from it and away from myself and just roughing that up. I like that fun torn edge, just old paper. I haven't done this in quite a long time, and this was way fun. I just don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. But now that we have all of that white paper, you can see the white core of that paper, we need to go back over it with that ink. So I'm going to do that. I'm also going to kind of crumble this a little, although you won't see most of it, but just a little crinkle, and then when you go over it with your ink, it kind of catches that. Then I want to take that same acrylic paint and add it with a very small brush. I'm not adding it everywhere, but I am getting it on the edges, on the very like edge of the paper, and then I'll do some areas that's a little bit thicker on the front edge of the paper. I want to tie this into that carrot background that we just created. So I want to add this on here, and this dries so super fast because I'm putting it on really, really thin. But it has kind of a sheen shimmer to it, which is really nice. And I think that goes really well with the embossing glaze. Okay, now I'm adding some foam tape behind that other panel. I'm being really careful because my paint is not quite dry yet. So I added the strips of foam tape. I'm pressing that down to the panel that we just inked up and painted, and then this will go onto an A2 size white card base. Even a craft base would be good now that I'm thinking about it. That probably would be a little bit better. So I can just use a little bit of tape runner to adhere that down. And I'm not going to add any other sentiments because I do like that grown with love sentiment on the front. But obviously you could put whatever you want on the inside. But I loved the front just as is. Now let me show you this up close here in just a second, and you can see all the fun stuff that we did to it. Look at that shine from that embossing glaze. The grungy from the ink. You have the stencil paste and the stamping and the acrylic paint. I just think this turned out really fun, and I think it's kind of a fun Easter card. Thank you guys so much for stopping by and watching. I hope that you enjoyed this project, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!